We do? Okay, let's go over to J.C. Shurburtt. He is with 247 Sports, specifically covers the South Carolina Gamecocks up there and does a heck of a job. Does radio up there as well. Wears many hats, does J.C. Shurburtt. No hat tonight, though, because his mom taught him not to do it indoors. Shurburtt, how's summer treating you, by the way?
Hey, it's been great, man. I've had a very eventful summer. Got to see Ron White in concert last Saturday. That was fun. Been to a couple of other concerts. Been to the beach. Been in the mountains. Ready for college football to start. So that's a good thing.
You've got, I guess I'd call it kind of an off-the-radar game in terms of the national scene. South Carolina, North Carolina State open up week one. North Carolina State's one of those teams that everyone who wants to sound smart has been mentioning as kind of a sneaky ACC dark horse contender. We'll talk about that game in a second, but first off, year one to year two under Will Muschamp at South Carolina. What's the biggest difference that I'll see this fall?
Well, I think you'll see a team that's stronger, more physical, faster. I think, obviously, anytime you start as many true freshmen at key positions on offense as the Gamecocks did last year, you're going to get overwhelmed. You know, they switched to Jake Bentley last 7 games. He performed very admirably considering his age. When they face those teams like Clemson and Florida, though, with top 5 to 10 defenses, you know, they still kind of went nowhere. They have a new offensive line coach who's kind of come in and moved some things around and gotten the guys stronger. They have a different kind of scheme up front that kind of relies more on power than finesse. So I think you're going to see improvement on offense. I think the defense at South Carolina, honestly, is still a year away. They do get Sky Moore back, which makes them, I think, faster and better on the as far as speed at linebacker goes. But I still don't think you're going to look at the Gamecock defense this year and go, well, that's a Will Muschamp defense. I think they still have to recruit and get some personnel in there in order to improve the overall talent level and continue to build it back.
All right, NC State, I think this game's in Charlotte. They're favored by 4 in that opener against South Carolina. I saw you put something up today about just the overall size they have at every unit defensively. It's not just defensive line, 270 across the board there. But, I mean, there's a ton of size even on their defensive backs. What kind of challenge does that pose?
I think it poses a big challenge, especially in the run game. You know, it's hard to block those big guys inside. They have a lot of girth. And then you're talking about, you know, Street's 270 pounds, Roseboro, who they bring off the bench, is 270. And then everybody knows about Bradley Chubb at 275. That's a heck of a big offensive line. Then you got a linebacker like Moore, who's a big 240-pounder. And their safeties, Josh, you know, you look at 6'2", 217 and 6'2", 220. I mean, those are some size linebackers at times. You know, they're a very, very physical defense. Dave Huxtable, their defensive coordinator, is a George O'Leary disciple. He has a long history of being associated with fantastic defenses, and they all will hit you in the mouth. So the Gamecocks have to be tough. I do think on the perimeter, South Carolina could have some advantages with Bentley in the passing game, Debo Samuel, Brian Edwards, and a receiver that's a freshman named Shi Smith. Yeah, I think they could have some opportunities if they can protect and if the spoffensive line holds up for the Gamecocks on Saturday.
What kind of, before I move on to the SEC East, what kind of record, just spitball it for me, South Carolina this year, is an 8-win season, I would imagine, is a pretty big success up there this year, yeah?
Yeah, the schedule this year is a lot different, Josh. You know, last year they had East Carolina, a bad team, Western Carolina, a bad SoCon team, and UMass, along with Clemson in the non-conference. This year it's NC State and Charlotte, Skip Holtz and Louisiana Tech, and Wofford, which is a triple option SoCon team, along with Clemson again. So the non-conference schedule is tougher. They have to go to Knoxville, to College Station, to Athens, and they play Florida and Georgia back-to-back in November. I think that's a disadvantage for them. I think given the way the schedule's kind of been laid out this year for the Gamecocks, if they can get back to a bowl, I think that's progress. I think if the offense plays better, which I think as far as the overall narrative for Will Muschamp and Kurt Roper, it needs to. I think that's progress. You know, I don't know that I could sit there and say they're going to win 8 or 9. They could, but they may not, you know, because the schedule's a lot different than it was last year when they eked out 6 wins and got to a bowl.
All right, let's broaden our perspective here for a second. Look, across the landscape of the SEC East, there have been varying opinions out there from Florida three-peating to Georgia and everyone else. Tennessee missed their window, perhaps. How do you see this shaking out this year?
Well, I'll say 2 things about this. First, I think Georgia on paper is the overwhelming favorite. Florida's got more skill talent than they have had. They're still unsettled at quarterback, and they lost a bunch of starters off that defense. I still think they're going to be a good defense, but you lose a bunch of starters and your defensive coordinator. I don't know why we're just chalking them up to having another good defense. On paper, Georgia with 10 starters back, with Chubb back, with the other back, with Jacob Eason a year older, there's really no reason why they should not win the SEC East. And I'll also say this. I don't know that Tennessee's missed their window. Everybody talks about how disappointing they were last year, and it was disappointing to lose to the Gamecocks, disappointing to lose to Vanderbilt. But sometimes teams, especially when you have as many injuries as they had last year, sometimes teams are a year late in arriving. And I'm just saying this. I'm not guaranteeing it. I think they're in trouble if they lose to Georgia Tech. They got to start fast. But sometimes you hit your window a little bit later, and that's the reason that they say you should be patient with coaches. So it would be a surprise to me if Tennessee won the East, but not a complete shock.
Take me up the road to Clemson or down the road. I don't know where you are geographically there, but what do I need to know about them this year? I know they're replacing a quarterback. So number one, talk about the borderline impossible task that is, considering who left. And number two, everyone's on Florida State. It seems like they were this time last year as well. So where does Clemson fit in all this and the national scene as well this year?
Well, Clemson's got Kelly Bryant is the starter. He's a guy that's kind of a veteran, was the backup last year. He's 6'4", he's 220 pounds. Excellent runner with the football. I'm not going to tell you he's the passer Deshaun Watson was, because he's not. He's not the player Deshaun Watson was. But they do have really good skill talent still. Have to replace their tight end, Jordan Leggett, who I thought was key down the stretch. Their offensive line should be very good. If they can find a consistent running back, whether that's C.J. Fuller, Adam Choice, or the kid from Louisiana that came in, the true freshman, Travis Etienne, if they can find a running back, I think they'll be able to run the football and get enough big plays out of their passing game to have a formidable offense. Then their front four on defense is one of the best in the country. You got Bryant, you got Farrell, you got Wilkins, you got that monster Dexter Lawrence. Their linebacking core is talented. A lot of talent in the secondary. So they're pretty stacked on D. This just may be a different type of Clemson team this year in terms of how they go win games. I don't know that they can get in too many track meets and expect to win unless Bryant is just amazingly that much better than we think he is. But I do think they can win their share of football games. If they get through September, where they have Auburn at home, at Louisville, and at Virginia Tech, you get through September with one or less losses, I think you're right back in the ACC title game, because FSU has to come to Death Valley this year. Remember that. They've won once at Death Valley since 2001.
Yeah, don't have to play Miami either. JC Shurburtt, you see his Twitter handle down there, 247 Sports is where you can find him. And Shurburtt, on a very heartfelt note, the Shurbies are very happy to have you back, my friend.
I'm happy to be back.
We'll talk to him all throughout the season, probably once a week, as it turns out. JC Shurburtt, always happy to have you with us, my man. You know, what he said about Florida's defense there, before we get right back to